there is a certain invitation in many of the Eastern and perennial philosophies about transcending your ego. And there is equally a warning or a challenge that we face in trying to do so because we are very identified with our egoic structure. So for a long time, it seems that the ego is trying to get rid of itself. My name is Pablo. This channel is Meditation Amsterdam. And if you find these topics interesting, do subscribe, like, and share. And today's topic is about how mapping yourself very thoroughly helps you transcend yourself. So the pickle that we face when we're trying to get rid of the ego or reduce our egoic tendencies is that we are working from an egoic perspective to get rid of an egoic perspective, and it's a challenging thing to do, if not impossible. However, we have one tool in our arsenal, and that is our power of observing, our power of observation. So one way that you could try to transcend your ego or many of its aspects is to get to know them very thoroughly. And there's a very simple reason for this, and it has to do with how we form our opinions about things or form a picture of what something is. In the beginning, we can't form a picture of what our egoic structures are because they have a momentum of their own, and many of them are taking place in our subconscious, outside of our awareness, and it's just what we think we are. We conduct ourselves in the belief that we are simply being who we are, and that there's no real rhyme or reason behind it. When we begin to map our opinions, our emotional reactions, our memories, our proclivities, and the different facets or personas that we put on as we deal with different situations in our life, we start to acquire a rather complete picture about what we call ourselves. The difficulty that is faced in the beginning is trying to transcend something that you don't even really know. It's so all-encompassing, it's so enveloping. This feeling of me is so enveloping that you can hardly step out of it. But as you begin to map it all, as you begin to map all the aspects of what you call yourself through mindful awareness, journaling, perhaps even counseling, what you begin to do is to form what you could call a Gestalt picture. Gestalt was a branch of psychology. I have not looked too much into detail about what it is, or let's say its history. But what I do understand about it, which is quite interesting, is that it's almost as if you start to map out something that is completely unknown, and you start to understand little aspects of it, one little aspect at a time, and you keep mapping, and it starts to unveil itself. And there comes a point where enough data points have been gathered so that a certain gestalt or a certain holistic picture about what it is that you're seeing starts to arise. You could imagine this as, say, having a painting that has a nasty coat of dust over it, and you have a wet sponge, and you begin to clear out little bits and pieces of it until a gestalt starts to arrive where you go, oh, this is the painting of a landscape, for example. And so you start to get a feel for like, oh, I think something is coming through here that is not just little blotches of random paint. And the more you clean the painting out, the more clarity you get about what is it that you're really looking at here. You go, oh, it's not just a landscape, but it's a sunny landscape. It's not just a sunny landscape, but it's a sunny landscape of a beach. is not just that, but it's a sunny landscape of a beach with a certain time of the day or whatever. So you get my meaning. This is exactly the process that takes place when you start to do self-cultivation. So in earlier readings that I've done about Gurdjieff for the book In Search of the Miraculous, he talks about working for a very long time at nothing other than mapping yourself. And this is, it's hard work. It's also very confronting work, can be very uncomfortable because you're finding out a lot of suppressed or repressed things. And for a long time, it's kind of a thankless task. And you're just collecting data and data and data. It requires a lot of persistence. It requires a lot of sincerity. It also requires a lot of focus. However, the payoff behind it is that as the gestalt, or the more general and impersonal notion of this me starts to be created, that is the only thing that will give you leverage to disassociate from it and stop identifying with your egoic structures. Without having created this map, your egoic structures are too murky and too stuck to your sense of self to make that separation plausible. So the more you map, the more a picture is created about what is an egoic structure that has no me in it. It's just a mental activity or a mental something. You can see it more at a distance because you have more clearly mapped it. You understand it better. You understand its gestalt, what it stands for. What all those me's in your psyche stand for are bundles of memory, emotion, bodily contraction, and opinions, pretty much. Object relations, as developmental psychology would call them. And when they are seen as that, they lose their grip on your awareness. So you can decouple your awareness from the content of the mind, all this identification and all this ego taking place. And so this essentially is an invitation, especially if you're in the starting phases of self-cultivation, self-realization, to spend a lot of time, dedicate a lot of time to mindfully being aware of everything you think, everything you feel, every reaction pattern, every regret, every guilty feeling, every feeling of lust, of laziness, of entrepreneurship, of compassion. Every single mental, emotional reality that arises and bodily reality that arises ought to be noticed, simply noticed. And so you note it, and if some of them really make an impact and you think that you are understanding something new, it's always good to keep a journal and just journal as much as you can. Personally, I've been doing this now for, I would say, a good 5 years in a very, I would say, dedicated manner. And what's happened as, say, since 2 months ago, or maybe a little bit more, is I seem to start to exhaust what that was about. It's not that I know myself utterly inside and out, but the payoff for observation and inventorization is starting to become a lot smaller than it used to be. So I often find myself thinking, is that journaling time of the morning? But I don't have a lot that's new to say anymore because the inventory is becoming quite complete. As I said, it might be a lifelong thing. It might restart at some point as well if I find a deeper layer. But that's to say that there needs to be an exhausting of the obvious before you even start to think about the transcending of the ego, or realizing non-duality, or realizing the no self. There's a real payoff, and there's a real wholesomeness to creating as complete a picture of your human self as you can, so that then the detachment from it, the detachment from the persona, can be a natural and plausible thing without either faking it or running into some kind of weird depersonalized snack that you find difficult to get out of later on. So that is it. So it is an invitation to ramp up your mindful awareness and to map yourself inside out to develop a gestalt for your egoic self that could then be transcended in an easier way. I hope that inspires you to go into practice, and I'll be back with more as usual. Cheerio.